Welcome back to Follow Me, 11B. Discussions on current events, macroeconomics, and freedom and liberty from a veteran's perspective. Today I wanted to talk about the Canadian trucker protest, the Freedom Convoy, and Canada's reaction to said protests. Came across a couple of articles here I thought were interesting. Let us go to the first. It's from the Associated Press from February 18th. And it is entitled, Canadian Police Arrest 100, Tow Vehicles Amid Protests in Ottawa. Ottawa, Ontario. Police began arresting protesters Friday in a bid to break the 3-week siege of Canada's capital by truckers angry over the country's illness restrictions. Some protesters surrendered and were taken into custody, police said. Some were seen being led away in handcuffs. So before I go any farther, I just wanted to go back to this line in the beginning of the article where it says, began arresting protesters Friday in a bid to break the 3-week siege of Canada's capital. Let me ask you this. What is a siege? Well, let's go straight to Webster's New World Dictionary. According to the dictionary, a siege is the encirclement of a fortified place by an enemy intending to take it. Is that what these truckers were? An enemy intending to take something? No, they were protesters. They were making their voices heard. And over 25 million copies in print. You can't argue with that. So, moving on to the next section of the article. At least 21 vehicles, some, if not all, allegedly used to anchor protesters downtown, had been removed, police said. Authorities continued to push protesters away from downtown and said they created a, quote, secured area where public assembly is temporarily prohibited. Quote, we're in control of the situation on the ground and continue to push forward, unquote. Interim Police Chief Steve Bell said at a news conference on Friday. So, just wanted to give you a quick, very short block of instructions on this Canadian Emergency Powers Act, which has been enacted. Parliament suspended the debate on the Canadian Emergencies Act, which gives Justin Trudeau and his government some pretty wide-reaching powers, which I'm going to get into in a moment. But in the text of the law, it says, quote, times of national emergency, quote, that seriously endanger the lives, health, or safety of Canadians, unquote. Now, I don't know if a bunch of truckers blocking a bridge or parking outside of the Capitol and honking air horns counts as providing a serious endangerment to the lives, health, or safety of Canadians. I'm thinking not, but I guess we'll find out in the future when it moves through the legal system, which I'm sure it will. But let's dive a little bit more into the Canadian government reaction to the protesters. On the second article, from the New York Post by Patrick Riley, February 17th, 2022, Canada's Justin Trudeau defends response to trucker protests. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, not to be confused with Fidel Castro or Richard Hatch from Battlestar Galactica, defended his government's invocation of the Emergencies Act in response to the trucker protests, calling the move a last resort. Law enforcement in Ottawa have warned demonstrators of imminent action. Quote, invoking the Emergencies Act is not, trying to get the Canadian thing down, not something that we do lightly, Trudeau said in the House of Commons Thursday, blocks from the protests. It's not the first option or even the second or the third. It's the last resort. We did it to protect families and small businesses, to protect jobs and the economy, the battled Prime Minister said. We did it because the situation could not be dealt with under any other law in Canada. I'm not so sure about that. They've arrested a bunch of people under existing law, some goofy stuff called mischief. So obviously you can deal with it under other laws. However, I'll let others worry about that. In the meantime, though, I wanted to address this quote, though, from Trudeau, where they did it to protect families and small businesses, protect jobs and the economy. Well, the whole protest is about the restrictions due to the illness that cost businesses, shut down businesses, destroyed jobs, and negatively impacted the economy. So this is a protest about this very thing. And when Justin Trudeau says he's trying to protect the same things that they're protesting to achieve, it holds zero water with me. It makes no sense. The act issued on Monday gives the Canadian federal government broad power to restore order. It's a 30-day order, according to the Canadian Emergencies Act, that I articulated earlier in times of national emergency. But my guess is they're not going to let up after only 30 days. It threatens to tow away vehicles to keep essential services running, freeze truckers' personal and corporate bank accounts, as well as that of supporters, by the way, and take further action to strike at their livelihoods. Financial institutions have been told to stop business with those associated with the protests, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland said Thursday, according to CBC. Some bank accounts of Canadian citizens who are peacefully protesting have, I might add, have already been frozen, she said. The consequences are real, and they will bite, Ms. Freeland said in a final warning to demonstrators. Freeland said the government feels, quote, great sorrow, unquote, about these actions, but argued that they were necessary to, my favorite quote of the whole article, defend our democracy and to restore peace and order. So, to defend democracy, you must first suspend democracy. Logic like this only makes sense in the mind of an authoritarian jackass. On Thursday, members of the Freedom Convoy who have protested the illness restrictions in Canada's capital since late January showed no signs of ending their blockade, despite police warnings that the demonstrators who refuse to leave will be forcefully removed. If you want to leave on your own terms, now is the time to do so, Ottawa's interim police chief Steve Bell told protesters on Thursday, calling action against demonstrators imminent, BBC reported. Bell gave no exact time for when he plans to clear out demonstrators, but warned that, quote, this weekend will be very different from past weekends. Law enforcement handed out flyers to protesters on Wednesday night that read, quote, the people of Ottawa are being denied the lawful use, enjoyment, and operation of their property, and you are causing businesses to close. That is mischief under the criminal code. You mean like all the wrong-headed thinking that led to all the policies that destroyed businesses, caused businesses to close, and denied Canadians the lawful use and enjoyment and operation of their property? Like, for the past 2 years? These people make zero sense. They're totally illogical. They're totally wrapped up in their own minds. As far as these restrictions go, the restrictions make no sense that they're trying to implement. Luckily for the truckers and the trucker supporters, many of the Canadian provinces around the U.S.-Canadian border have loosened restrictions in recent days and weeks, in basically in response to these very protests, this trucker convoy. But what we're watching right now is a clinic in authoritarianism that's happening in real time. Now, again, I do not think that these truckers are going to stop. I think that they left the bridges. I think that they left the border crossings. But I think that they're going to keep going. I think that they're going to keep the protest alive, even though Canada's doing their best to shut them down. They arrested a couple of the organizers of the protest today. And, I mean, we're literally watching an authoritarian dictatorship emerge before our very eyes. So I hope I'm wrong. If things go back to status quo after 30 days, great. But I think Canadians have finally realized that if the government doesn't like your political point of view, they can freeze your bank account. They can take your money. They can cancel your insurance. They can tow your vehicle. They can throw you in jail. So I think one of the consequences about this is going to be cryptocurrency is going to gain some popularity, since crypto cannot currently be actively touched by governments. They're doing their best to get in there and get the camel's nose under the tent, but so far it hasn't happened quite yet. So if you want to have access to funds without worrying about the government taking it from you, Canada, maybe crypto is the way to go. I don't know, but it's definitely something to consider. But very, very disturbing to watch this happen. And the worst thing is, most people aren't paying a whole lot of attention, I think, in this country, in the U.S., because it's Canada. And hey, why do we care? It's Canada. But I ask you this: a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even 6 months ago, could you have ever imagined that this happening in Canada? Some similar things are happening in Australia. Would you have ever imagined any of the things that are happening in Australia or Canada happening a couple of years ago? No, of course not. So if it can happen in Canada, if it can happen in Australia, it can certainly happen here. Luckily, we have a constitution that gives us a little bit of a shield, but again, it's a little bit of a shield. So we've got to stay on our guard. We've got to keep our eyes out and make sure that we know what's happening in the world around us. Otherwise, we're doomed to go down the same road that other countries and even our very neighbors are experiencing right now. But I would love to hear what you guys think about the Canadian trucker protest and our neighbor to the north's reaction to it. So please visit us at Facebook on Follow Me 11B, at Twitter at Follow Me 11B, and of course here on the YouTube channel. Make a comment or two, and don't forget to visit us at The Real Follow Me 11B on Instagram, and we will see you on the next video.